Once again, welcome to ITSE 2309. And today we're going to talk about Chapter 3. Now, we've been talking about information and data and models and stuff, but one of the things you have to worry about is Chapter 3 speaks to breaking data down into smaller, more manageable units. Now, one of the things that Chapter 3 turns or speaks to is new terminology, new terms, new definitions. For example, let's go back to that doctor-patient scenario. So you have the patient, you have the spouse, you had child 1, child 2, and child 3. Now, so each of these individuals is supposed to be separate. But yet, this is a whole unit. Now, if child 1 is ill and gets treatment, so how does the bill get paid? I mean, who pays the bill? How do you connect this child to the patient holder, the subscriber? There has to be some way, there has to be some identifier that will unite these items. So you have to have some kind of primary identifier. So you have to have some kind of primary identifier on all these. So you have to have a key that will lock all these items together. You'll have to have a primary identifier. You'll have to have a primary key that will lock all these units together as one item, but yet still have the ability to break this data down as needed. So what this chapter speaks to is the fact that as you break data down into smaller, more manageable pieces, you still need a primary identifier. You need a primary key that will be able to link these items together and lock these items together. Now, so there's this concept of the identifier and how this relates. So you would have a primary identifier here. So you have a primary key here. Now that is what holds everything together. Now remember that because of the HIPAA laws, every item has to be unique. But there still has to be a way to look back at the original item. So if this is the primary identifier, the spouse has to have a unique identifier, but it still has to have the ability to hook up to the primary identifier. And what happens is that, so you'll have a primary identifier here, or the key, which is unique to that event, but then this primary key becomes a secondary issue. It becomes a foreign key. Okay? So this primary identifier becomes a secondary identifier to the spouse. Now the spouse still has a unique identifier that keeps it individualized. And the primary key here, which is unique to this individual, now becomes a secondary identifier here. So then that is also cascaded down the line. So you have the primary identifier here, and then you'll have the second identifier here, which is this one down here, and then you have the same thing here. So you have the primary identifier, and then you have a second identifier. So what you can do is you can tie all these together based off that secondary identifier. All right? Now it gets even more interesting in the case, let's say for example, for whatever reason, one of these now has a grandchild. So now you have the grandchild. Okay? Now the grandchild would be subordinate to the parent of that child. So now what would happen is that you would have, this would be the primary identifier. It would also have a second identifier. Now this also has a primary identifier, and it also has a secondary identifier. However, remember that this one hooks up to this, and now this is going to hook up to this one. Okay? So this primary identifier here now is going to be the second identifier down here. Now, if they treat the grandchild, now the grandchild identifier is subordinate to the parent, and the parent is subordinate to the grandparent. Now, the way the bill gets paid is that the parent becomes the methodology that connects 1 to 3. 2 does not provide any information. 2 provides the ability to connect 1 to 3 via the identifiers that are being used. Okay? And that is the primary key, the foreign key, and how the relational database works, as in this relational family that we have, that we're playing with. Now, you notice here that we have got one account, the account. Now, this one account has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different items. So you have one to many relationship. Now, understanding that each of these have the same account number, but the one account number is supporting many items. So you can have a one-to-one account, a one-to-many account, or a many-to-many account. And that's how we're going to deal with this particular event. Let's see what else. I guess for the purpose of this chapter, that about concludes the items. We're talking about the primary key, the foreign key, the one-to-one relationship, the one-to-many relationships, the many-to-many relationships, the terminology that we're going to be using, the foreign key, the primary key, and that's about it. So that about concludes chapter 3.